This is painful to watch. The comment carried across the weight room floor at Gold's Gym in downtown San Diego, California, loud enough to make heads turn and draw uncomfortable attention to the elderly man performing a set of carefully controlled dumbbell presses. Brandon Cole, 26 years old and 18 months into his career as a certified personal trainer, stood with his arms crossed and a smirk that radiated the particular arrogance of someone who had confused six-pack abs with wisdom. He wore the unofficial uniform of young fitness influencers, a tight tank top that showed off his physique, designer athletic shorts, expensive training shoes, and a backwards baseball cap. His phone was propped on a nearby bench, recording his workout for his Instagram following of 47,000 people who watched his content for fitness tips and, increasingly, for his confrontational gym fails videos that mocked people he deemed to be exercising incorrectly. The target of his mockery was Robert Hayes, 75 years old, performing a set of shoulder presses with 15-pound dumbbells at a pace that looked glacially slow compared to the explosive movements favored by younger gym members. Robert wore simple gray sweatpants, a faded Marines t-shirt that had been washed so many times the logo was barely visible, and New Balance cross-trainers that had clearly logged thousands of miles. His white hair was cut in a flat-top style that suggested a lifetime of military discipline, and his weathered face showed the deep lines that come from decades of outdoor training in all weather conditions. To Brandon's eye, Robert looked like exactly the type of person who didn't belong in a serious gym, someone who should be doing gentle exercises at a senior center, not taking up space and equipment that younger, more serious athletes could use. Brandon walked closer to Robert's position, making a show of examining his form with exaggerated critical assessment. "Sir, I don't mean to interrupt, but you're doing those completely wrong. Your tempo is way too slow, your range of motion is limited, and those weights are too light to provide any actual benefit. You're basically wasting your time and taking up equipment." Several other gym members had paused their workouts to watch the interaction, their expressions ranging from secondhand embarrassment to open disapproval of Brandon's approach. This wasn't the first time they'd witnessed him offering unsolicited and unnecessarily harsh critique, but this felt particularly egregious because Robert Hayes had been a fixture at this Gold's Gym location for over a decade, always polite, always cleaning up after himself, and always performing his workouts with the kind of methodical precision that suggested deep knowledge rather than ignorance. Robert completed his set before responding, lowering the dumbbells with the same controlled movement he'd used to lift them, then setting them carefully on the rack with perfect positioning so the next person could easily access them. He turned to face Brandon with pale blue eyes that held depths the young trainer couldn't begin to comprehend. "I appreciate your concern, son, but I'm using the appropriate weight and tempo for my training goals." The response was delivered in a quiet voice that carried the slight rasp of age, without defensiveness or anger, just simple statement of fact. But Brandon, playing to his phone camera and his imaginary audience, pressed forward. "Your training goals? Sir, with all due respect, if your goal is to maintain muscle mass and functional fitness at your age, you need to be lifting heavier weights with more intensity. What you're doing is basically glorified physical therapy. This is a real gym where people come to actually train, not to do gentle exercises that wouldn't challenge a middle schooler." The condescension in his voice was thick enough to cut with a knife, and several nearby gym members exchanged disgusted looks. An older man doing pull-ups at the assisted machine called out, "Hey, leave him alone." Robert knows what he's doing, but Brandon was committed to his performance now, too invested in his persona to back down without losing face in front of his phone camera. "Look, I'm a certified personal trainer. I've studied exercise science, biomechanics, and program design. I know what effective training looks like, and this isn't it. Those 15-pound dumbbells might have been challenging when you were younger, but at this point you're just going through the motions." He gestured at his own physique with the kind of self-satisfied pride that made several people in the gym actively hope someone would humble him. "I can press 60-pound dumbbells for reps. That's what real training looks like. What you're doing is just sad, honestly. Maybe you should consider switching to water aerobics or chair yoga, something more appropriate for your age and fitness level." Robert had returned to his workout, beginning a set of lateral raises with 10-pound dumbbells, performing each repetition with the same controlled tempo that had drawn Brandon's initial mockery. The movement was textbook perfect, arms rising to just below shoulder height, elbows slightly bent, controlling the weight both up and down, focusing on the deltoid muscles rather than using momentum. Each rep took approximately 4 seconds up and 4 seconds down, a tempo that created significantly more time under tension than the explosive movements Brandon favored. "I'm not trying to be mean," Brandon continued, his voice carrying across the weight room. "I'm trying to help. But you're setting a bad example for other people in the gym who might think this is how you're supposed to train. It's not. You need more weight, more speed, more intensity. That's basic exercise science. I literally have a certificate in this." He pulled out his phone from where it had been recording and made a show of searching for something, then turned the screen to show Robert his Instagram page with its 47,000 followers. "I'm kind of a big deal in the fitness community. People trust my advice. And my advice is that what you're doing is pointless." The sound of the gym's front door opening with its characteristic electronic chime barely registered above the general noise of clanking weights and background music. But what happened next would fundamentally change the trajectory of Brandon's day and possibly his entire career as a fitness influencer. Master Gunnery Sergeant Michael Torres, 54 years old and currently assigned to Marine Corps Recruit Depot San Diego as the senior physical training instructor, walked through the door in civilian workout clothes but carrying himself with the unmistakable bearing of a career Marine. He had just finished a long day of supervising recruit training and had come to the gym for his own workout, as he did 6 days a week without fail. Torres was built like a fireplug, 5 feet 9 inches of solid muscle earned through 32 years of military service, with close-cropped graying hair, a weathered face that showed his Mexican-American heritage, and eyes that could switch from warm to intimidating in a heartbeat. He checked in at the desk, exchanged familiar greetings with the staff who knew him well, and walked toward the weight room while pulling on his lifting gloves. The first thing he heard as he entered was Brandon's voice carrying across the gym. "I'm trying to help, but you're setting a bad example." Torres's head snapped toward the sound, and his eyes immediately found Robert Hayes performing lateral raises while a young man in a backwards baseball cap stood over him with a phone, apparently lecturing him. Torres's expression went from casual to thunderous in approximately 1 second. He recognized Robert immediately. Everyone in the Marine Corps physical training community knew who Robert Hayes was, even if the general public didn't. Torres changed direction and walked toward the confrontation with the purposeful stride of someone who was about to deliver a lesson that would be remembered for years. "Excuse me," Torres said, his voice cutting through Brandon's monologue like a drill instructor's command. "What exactly is going on here?" Brandon turned, slightly annoyed at being interrupted during his content creation. He saw a muscular older man in a plain gray t-shirt and black shorts, someone who looked fit but whom Brandon didn't recognize from his regular gym crowd. "I'm providing some free coaching advice to this gentleman. He's performing his exercises with incorrect form and inadequate intensity. As a certified personal trainer, I felt obligated to—" "You're a certified personal trainer?" Torres interrupted, his voice dripping with contempt. "What's your certification?" "Through which organization?" The question was delivered with the precision of someone who already knew the answer would be inadequate. "ISA," Brandon said, his confidence faltering slightly at Torres's tone. "International Sports Sciences Association. It's one of the most respected certifications in the industry. I studied for 6 weeks and passed the exam with—" "6 weeks," Torres repeated, letting the words hang in the air. "You studied fitness for 6 weeks, and now you're critiquing the training methods of the man who literally wrote the Marine Corps Physical Training Manual that's been in use for the last 40 years, the man who designed the conditioning programs that have prepared millions of Marines for combat, the man who was inducted into the Strength and Conditioning Hall of Fame in 2003. That's who you're giving free coaching advice to." The weight room had gone almost silent, with nearly every person stopping their workout to watch what was unfolding. Brandon's confident expression had cracked, replaced by growing uncertainty. I don't know what you're talking about. This is just an old guy doing physical therapy exercises with tiny weights. Torres pulled out his phone and pulled up several images, turning the screen to show Brandon. The first image was the official Marine Corps photograph from the 1970s showing a much younger Robert Hayes in Marine Corps uniform with Staff Sergeant chevrons standing in front of a group of recruits. The second image was a book cover, Functional Strength Training for Combat Readiness, by Robert Hayes, USMC, Ret. The third image was a photograph from a military fitness conference showing an older Robert receiving an award from a 3-star general. "This is Master Sergeant Robert Hayes, retired," Torres said, his voice carrying clearly across the now silent gym. He served 26 years in the Marine Corps, 22 of them as the senior physical training instructor at Parris Island and San Diego recruit depots. He trained over 50,000 recruits during his career. After retirement, he worked as a civilian consultant redesigning physical fitness programs for all branches of the U.S. military. Torres wasn't finished. He pulled up another image on his phone, this one showing a younger version of himself standing next to Robert at what appeared to be a training facility. "This photograph was taken 23 years ago when I was a young sergeant, and Master Sergeant Hayes was teaching an instructor course at Quantico. He personally trained me in proper exercise program design. Everything I know about physical conditioning I learned from him or from instructors he trained. The techniques you're mocking as too slow and too light are called time under tension training and controlled eccentric movement. They're advanced techniques that create superior muscle development compared to the explosive momentum-based movements you favor. The reason Master Sergeant Hayes uses 15-pound dumbbells is because at that tempo and control level, 15 pounds provides more effective stimulus than your 60-pound dumbbells pressed with momentum and poor form." Brandon's face had gone from confident to pale, his earlier swagger completely deflated. He looked at Robert with new eyes, seeing not a confused old man but someone whose credentials were so far beyond his own that comparison was laughable. "The lateral raises you just criticized?" Torres continued. "That exact exercise, performed at that exact tempo, is prescribed in the Marine Corps fitness manual that Master Sergeant Hayes wrote. It's used by every Marine Corps strength coach in the world. The tempo is specifically designed to maximize shoulder development while minimizing injury risk. The weight is appropriate for the movement because the goal is muscle activation, not ego lifting." Robert had continued his workout throughout this entire exchange, seemingly unbothered, completing his set of lateral raises and moving to a bench for what appeared to be a set of controlled chest flies. Torres walked over to him, and their interaction showed mutual respect built over decades. "Master Sergeant Hayes, I apologize for this interruption to your training. This young man didn't know who you were." Robert smiled gently, that same patient expression he'd maintained throughout Brandon's criticism. "No apology necessary, Mike. The young man was trying to help, even if his approach was a bit misguided. I remember being young and confident, too. Thought I knew everything about training until I got humbled by some older Marines who showed me how much I still had to learn." Torres turned back to Brandon, his expression slightly less harsh. "You're going to learn something today that they apparently didn't cover in your 6-week certification course. The most knowledgeable people in any field are often the ones who don't need to advertise their expertise. They don't need to mock others or create confrontational videos for social media. They just quietly do their work and let their results speak for themselves." He gestured around the weight room, where several older men were performing various exercises with the same controlled tempo and relatively light weights that Robert used. "See those guys? That's Tom Richardson, former Navy SEAL, 68 years old, still in better shape than most 30-year-olds. That's Carlos Martinez, retired Army Ranger, 72, can still do more pull-ups than you. That's James Chen, former Air Force Para-Rescue, 65, competed in powerlifting nationals last year. They all train with Master Sergeant Hayes's methods. They all use what you call tiny weights with slow tempo because they understand that training for longevity and functional fitness is different than training for Instagram photos." Brandon had been slowly backing away during this explanation, his phone forgotten in his hand, no longer recording, no longer interested in creating content from this situation. He just wanted to disappear, to somehow undo the last 10 minutes of his life. "I didn't know," he managed to say, his voice barely audible. "I'm sorry. I was just trying to—" "You were trying to get content for your social media," Torres interrupted. "You were trying to mock someone to make yourself look knowledgeable. You saw an opportunity to punch down at someone you thought was vulnerable, and you took it. That's not coaching. That's bullying with a certification." Robert stood up from his bench, having completed his set, and approached Brandon directly. Up close, despite his age, Robert's physique was impressive. Lean, functional muscle with the kind of real-world strength that came from decades of consistent training rather than cycles of bulking and cutting for aesthetics. "Son, let me give you some actual free coaching advice," Robert said, his voice kind despite everything. "There's a big difference between training for performance and training for appearance. Your methods might help someone look good in a mirror or a photograph, but my methods keep people functional and healthy into their 70s and 80s. I'm 75 years old, I train 6 days a week, I have full range of motion in every joint, I'm not on any pain medications, and I can still do every physical task I need to do in daily life. How many of your clients will be able to say that when they reach my age?" He paused, letting that sink in. "Your certification taught you the basics of exercise mechanics. That's good. But it didn't teach you wisdom, humility, or respect. Those come from experience and from being willing to learn from people who know more than you do. I've trained Marines who went on to become Olympic athletes, Special Forces soldiers, and fitness professionals respected worldwide. I've forgotten more about physical conditioning than most trainers will ever learn. But I don't need to announce that to everyone I meet. I just do my work." Torres added his own perspective. "In the Marine Corps, we have a saying, respect the wisdom of those who came before. The techniques Master Sergeant Hayes uses are backed by 50 years of results, by thousands of success stories, by research and refinement, and real-world testing in the harshest environments. Your 6-week certification and your Instagram following don't override that experience." The gym manager, a former college athlete named Derek who had been alerted to the situation by staff, approached the group. He had witnessed enough of the interaction to understand what had happened. "Brandon, I need to see you in my office. Now." His tone made it clear this wasn't a request. As Brandon followed the manager toward the office, his earlier confidence completely shattered, Robert returned to his workout. Several gym members approached to shake his hand or offer quiet words of support. The older men Torres had pointed out came over to form an impromptu training group, their camaraderie evident in how they spotted each other and offered quiet corrections to each other's form. Torres stayed for a few minutes, catching up with Robert about mutual friends in the military fitness community, discussing new research on training for older athletes, sharing stories about former students who had gone on to successful military careers. "Master Sergeant," Torres said before leaving to start his own workout, "thank you for everything you taught me. I use your methods every day with my recruits, and I see the results in how they perform. You've saved careers and lives by preparing people properly for the physical demands of military service." Robert waved off the gratitude with the modesty of someone who genuinely didn't need recognition. "You're doing the real work now, Mike. I just wrote some things down that seem to work. You're the one out there every day making sure the next generation is prepared." Brandon Cole emerged from the manager's office 20 minutes later, his membership suspended pending review, his earlier arrogance replaced by genuine humility and shame. The video he had recorded was deleted at the manager's insistence, and he was required to issue a public apology on his Instagram account explaining what had happened, though he chose to phrase it as a learning experience about respecting experience over credentials. Several of his followers unfollowed him after the post, but others appreciated the honesty and the lesson. Robert Hayes continued his training at Gold's Gym in downtown San Diego, maintaining his 6-day-a-week schedule, using his tiny weights and slow tempo to maintain the functional fitness that let him hike, surf, and live independently at 75. He continued to quietly influence the fitness community through his example, through conversations with people who asked genuine questions, and through the legacy of the thousands of military personnel he had trained over his career. And Brandon Cole, after his suspension ended, returned to the gym with a fundamentally changed perspective. He approached Robert one morning, weeks later, and asked if he would consider taking him on as a mentee to learn proper programming for longevity and functional fitness. Robert agreed, beginning a training relationship that transformed Brandon from an Instagram-focused trainer into someone who genuinely helped clients achieve lasting results. The incident became legendary in the San Diego fitness community, a cautionary tale about the dangers of assumptions and the value of respecting experience. And every trainer who heard the story walked away with the same lesson. The most knowledgeable people often look the most ordinary, and true expertise doesn't need to announce itself. Where are you watching from today? Tell us in the comments about a time when you learned to respect experience over appearance. Subscribe to Hidden Legends for more stories proving that real knowledge is earned through decades, not weeks.